America laughed at him, judged him, copied him, feared him, and still could not look away. Dennis Rodman was never just the worm. He was the strange genius of the missed shot, the man who could read failure in the air and turn it into one more chance. With the Detroit Pistons and the Chicago Bulls, he helped build 5 championships without needing the ball to love him back. But behind the dyed hair, the spectacle, and the roaring arenas was a quieter wound. A boy shaped by absence, a man adored by millions, and a father still facing losses no rebound could bring home. Before we begin, honor Dennis Rodman with a like, and subscribe for more human stories behind the legends of sport. A child can be shaped by a door that never opens. Dennis Rodman was born in Trenton, New Jersey, in 1961, but the emotional weather of his childhood settled in Oak Cliff, Dallas, where his mother, Shirley Rodman, carried the pressure of raising her children through strain, work, and uncertainty. His father, Philander Rodman Jr., left when Dennis was very young, and that absence became one of the earliest shadows in his life. It did not need a dramatic scene to matter. It lived in ordinary places, in questions that slowly stopped being asked, in rooms where a child learned that an empty space can still have weight. Rodman did not grow up as the chosen boy on the court. There was no early spotlight waiting for him, no smooth American sports story, no coach pointing at him as if greatness had already arrived. He was quiet, uncertain, and often overlooked, especially beside sisters who seemed to find sports more naturally. Before he became the man who made crowds watch every missed shot, he was a boy trying to understand where he belonged. That early invisibility mattered. It gave him a wound, and it gave him a hunger. A young person who feels unseen can spend years learning how to disappear, or spend a lifetime forcing the world to look. In Rodman's case, both instincts seemed to live inside him at once. The shy child who wanted a place to land, and the future public figure who would make silence nearly impossible around his name. Oak Cliff did not hand Rodman a legend. It handed him pressure, comparison, and the ache of being late to his own possibility. On neighborhood courts, he was not yet strong enough, not yet tall enough, not yet impossible to ignore. He watched the game from the edges before he learned how to own the edges. He learned the feeling of standing close to a dream without being fully invited inside it. That feeling would become one of the hidden engines of his career. The game did not open for him early, so he studied the edges of every space he entered. He watched how people moved, how attention worked, how confidence sounded in other boys' voices, and how quickly a person could be passed over if he did not bring value the room could recognize. Rodman would later say and do many things that made America uncomfortable, but underneath the spectacle was a simpler human need, the need to be recognized, to be useful, to matter in a place where people could no longer look through him. His childhood should not be reduced to sadness alone. It was also the first chapter of his strange resilience. The boy who had no obvious place in the game slowly became a man who built his greatness out of places other people ignored. He would never become the classic hero America expected from a basketball star. He became a different kind of figure, wounded, restless, difficult to categorize, and brilliant in the spaces where missed chances could still be saved. Rodman did not arrive early, and that became part of the meaning of his life. After high school, the road did not lead straight to bright arenas or national attention. It moved through work, uncertainty, and the long fluorescent hours of Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, where he stood among travelers going somewhere, while his own future still felt unprinted. That image matters because it tells us the first great truth of his athletic life. He was not carried into basketball by childhood fame. He was not protected by expectation. He came late, and because he came late, effort became his language. His body changed after the years when scouts usually begin circling names. Height, length, speed, and restless energy arrived almost like a delayed answer, after the world had already decided who deserved attention. By then, Rodman already knew what it meant to be overlooked, so when the game finally opened a small door, he did not treat it like a casual opportunity. He treated it like a rescue line. He had no room to waste possessions, practices, or second chances. Every loose ball seemed to carry a private message: get there first, or be forgotten again. At Southeastern Oklahoma State, far from the polished machinery of major college basketball, Rodman found a court that did not care how invisible he had once felt. It only asked what he was willing to give before the final horn. He ran as if fatigue belonged to other men. He chased loose balls with the urgency of a person reaching for a life that had almost passed him by. He rebounded with a hunger deeper than statistics. Every practice became a reply to the years when nobody had called him special. The ball striking the rim became a sound he could study. The missed shot became less like failure and more like an invitation. He began to understand that basketball was full of possessions, abandoned too soon by people who were waiting for beauty instead of work. Rodman chose the work. He chose the second jump, the awkward angle, the crowded lane, the body contact, the thankless recovery. The Detroit Pistons selected him in the 1986 National Basketball Association draft, in the second round with the 27th overall pick. That was not a golden entrance. It was a narrow opening. Rodman entered the league older than the usual dream, rougher than the usual prospect, and without the comfort of guarantees. He did not step into professional basketball like a star being welcomed home. He stepped in like a man who knew he would have to prove himself possession by possession, night by night, collision by collision, until the league understood that his value did not need to look familiar in order to be real. Detroit gave Dennis Rodman more than a uniform. It gave him structure, discipline, and a role clear enough for a wounded young man to understand. The Pistons of that era were known as the Bad Boys, a team built on defense, contact, trust, nerve, and the willingness to make every possession uncomfortable. For Rodman, that world did not soften his edges. It gave them a purpose. Under Chuck Daly, he found a professional shape for all the energy that might otherwise have scattered. He could run, guard, switch, chase, disrupt, and move through traffic without needing the offense to belong to him. In a league that worshipped scorers, Rodman discovered that a player could alter everything without owning the scoreboard. He could drain a star's patience. He could make a pass feel dangerous. He could keep a possession alive when everyone else had already turned to run. Detroit won championships in 1989 and 1990, and Rodman became part of a basketball language built from resistance. The crowd might remember the final basket, but teammates remember the person who made that basket possible by reaching the ball first, by tipping it loose, by forcing one more second of doubt into the opponent's hands. In Detroit, Rodman learned that being necessary could feel almost like being loved. The city did not ask him to be polished in the old way. The team did not ask him to become a graceful scorer or a public face. It asked him to bring his body, his attention, his speed, his strange courage, and the full force of a man who understood the cost of being overlooked. For a young player with old wounds, that role had meaning. It turned private hunger into public usefulness. The years after Detroit carried Rodman into a wider, stranger American spotlight, but Chicago gave his basketball gift its largest stage. Beside Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, and under Phil Jackson's calm command, Rodman became the perfect strange piece in a dynasty that already had scoring, leadership, and global myth. The Bulls did not need him to become another polished star. They needed him to protect the margins where championships are often decided. From 1996 through 1998, his number 91 jersey became part of the team's pulse. Jordan could rise into history, Pippen could guard and create with elegant force, and Rodman could live inside the collision zone, turning missed shots into life. He gave Chicago extra possessions in a sport where time is merciless. He guarded difficult men, entered the paint as if pain were part of the assignment, and made opponents feel crowded before the box score could explain why they were tired. On those Bulls teams, his work became both obvious and invisible at the same time. Everyone knew he mattered, yet the beauty of his contribution often appeared in the seconds before the highlight. A Jordan shot, a Pippen drive, a late-game possession, a roar from the crowd. Somewhere underneath it, Rodman had battled for space, predicted the ball, or forced an opponent to take a shot from a place he did not want to be. 5 National Basketball Association championships, 7 rebounding titles, 2 Defensive Player of the Year awards, 7 All-Defensive First-Team selections, and 11,954 career rebounds later gave the record a hard outline. But the numbers only point toward the deeper truth. Rodman mastered the part of basketball that happens before the roar, before the poster, before the replay, before the clean line in the history book. He made defense and rebounding feel less like support work and more like a form of control. In his best years, he changed the emotional rhythm of a game. A missed shot by his team did not always feel like an ending. A clean look by the opponent did not always feel safe. Rodman lived in the uncomfortable middle, where bodies leaned, elbows rose, legs tangled, and a single possession could decide the mood of an entire arena. The cost was written into the body, though the cameras often moved too quickly to honor it. Rebounds came through shoulders, ribs, knees, hardwood, and the daily punishment of entering the most crowded part of the floor. After the horn, when victory looked smooth from far away, the close view was different. Tape coming off skin, sweat cooling on a jersey, ice wrapped around places that had absorbed the night. In his Hall of Fame speech in 2011, Rodman said he did not play the game for money and did not play it to be famous. The line mattered because fame followed him anyway, and because the jersey hanging after a game never told the whole story of what it had absorbed. On the court, he could predict where the ball would go. Away from the court, life would begin moving in directions no player can diagram. A rebound begins before the ball comes down. It begins in the feet, in the hips, in the small decision to claim space before anyone else fully understands where the ball is going. To the casual eye, rebounding can look like instinct, height, muscle, or luck. In Dennis Rodman's hands, it became study. He watched the arc of a shot, the spin off the rim, the release of a shooter, the angle of a long miss, the softness of a close miss, the way a ball could kick toward the weak side or fall dead near the paint. He listened to the sound of failure. The ball struck iron, and while others reacted to the miss, Rodman was already moving toward its future. That is why his genius was so strange. He built greatness from the moment other players accepted disappointment. A scorer practices with the fantasy of applause already waiting. A rebounder practices with the sound of rejection. The shot missing, the rim refusing it, the crowd inhaling, the body answering before thought catches up. Rodman turned that rejected second into a profession. He made the missed shot feel alive again. There was loneliness inside that craft. Rebounding is work without glamour, until the scoreboard proves its value. It asks a player to enter traffic again and again, to fight for the same narrow square of air, to absorb contact without expecting the highlight to belong to him. Rodman's rebounds were not decorations on a stat sheet, they were extensions of time. They gave his teams another breath, another pass, another shot, another chance to turn failure into control. But every one of those chances had a physical price. The public version made it look wild, almost theatrical, as if Rodman simply appeared where chaos needed him. The private version was colder and more exacting. It required repetition, memory, timing, pain tolerance, and trust that the body would respond on command. He had to believe the first step would still be there. He had to believe the jump would still rise through contact. He had to believe soreness could be pushed aside until the horn released him. Every athlete learns the language of pain, but Rodman's role required him to speak it fluently. His value came from choosing the area of the floor where gratitude arrived late and bodies met hardest. That is what makes rebounding the perfect mirror for Rodman's life. He became great by chasing what others missed. He found meaning in loose chances, broken rhythm, failed shots, and spaces nobody else wanted badly enough. The boy who once felt unseen became the man who saw what others overlooked. The player who did not need the ball to be important became one of the most unforgettable figures in basketball history. But the same gift that made him powerful on the court could not protect him everywhere. A rebound has rules, a ball has angles, a rim has patterns. A missed shot can be studied, predicted, and brought back into play. Human loss is different. Family distance does not always bounce cleanly. A missed year does not always return to the hand that reaches for it. A child's memory cannot be boxed out, tipped loose, or recovered at the final second. Rodman's genius was built on second chances, yet his deepest private wounds would show him that life does not always offer them on command. On the floor, he could save a possession that looked gone. Away from the floor, he would have to face losses no vertical leap could reach. Rodman's private life was often pulled into public view, sometimes with more noise than understanding. He had relationships and marriages that became part of the media's fascination with him, including chapters connected to Annie Bakes, Madonna, Carmen Electra, and Michelle Moyer. For many viewers, those names became pieces of a spectacle, a way to watch the colorful star outside the arena. But if the story stays too long on romance, headlines, and public curiosity, it misses the deeper wound. The most important question in Rodman's private life is not who stood beside him under bright lights. It is what happened when the lights moved away and family required presence, patience, and steadiness. A player can be trained for a defensive rotation. He can be taught where to stand when the ball moves. He can be corrected by a coach, challenged by a teammate, and measured by a score. Family asks for a different discipline. It asks for consistency without applause, softness without performance, and ordinary presence when the world is not watching. That was a harder court for Rodman than any arena he ever entered. That is why this chapter must stay brief, but not empty. Rodman's relationships should not be turned into easy judgment, and the women in his life should not be treated as props in his pain. His private world was complicated, watched, and often unstable, shaped by fame, travel, public curiosity, and a personality the media loved to frame as spectacle. Yet the emotional center of the story leads somewhere more serious: fatherhood. The same man who could compete for space under the rim struggled with the quieter spaces where love asks a person to stay, listen, return, and be ordinary. Fame could make him visible to millions, but visibility is not the same as presence. Applause could follow him across America, but applause does not answer a child at the right time. A headline can make a person feel larger than life, yet a family does not need a headline. It needs the repeated proof of care. It needs the familiar voice, the kept promise, the seat that is occupied when it matters, the parent who does not become easier to find on television than at home. Rodman's romantic life may have filled magazines and entertainment segments, but the deeper story is not about scandal. It is about the private cost of becoming a public figure while still carrying wounds from childhood. The story now moves from relationships to the wound that became one of the clearest and most painful mirrors of his life. Dennis Rodman's public image did not arrive all at once. It grew from years of being overlooked, then became armor, then became a demand. In San Antonio, the transformation became impossible to miss. The quiet worker from Detroit began appearing with hair colors that announced him before he spoke, with tattoos, piercings, clothes, and gestures that collided with the old rules of American sports. He had found a way to make the world look directly at him. For a while, that attention may have felt like survival. The boy who once stood outside the circle had become impossible to ignore. Chicago made the image larger, because Chicago was already a stage, built for history. Beside Jordan, Pippen, and Jackson, Rodman's strangeness did not weaken the dynasty. It became part of its edge. America came for the rebounds and stayed for the spectacle. The strange part is that the spectacle never erased the craft. The bright hair did not pull down the rebounds. The public persona did not remove the timing, the discipline, or the basketball mind that made him valuable. If anything, Rodman became harder for America to understand because he was both at once. A serious player inside a shocking image, a champion who looked like a rebel, a disciplined worker whose public life seemed to resist discipline. After basketball, entertainment and wrestling gave him new crowds, new lights, and new ways to continue being Dennis Rodman, even as the player inside that image began to age. But the cost of becoming a symbol is that the public keeps asking the symbol to appear even when the person is tired. Rodman's unusual entrances, public episodes, international attention, and later personal difficulties were covered and replayed in ways that often left little room for the full human being. The image that helped him escape invisibility also followed him everywhere. It traveled from arena to airport, from camera flash to quiet hallway, from television frame to family life. A man can spend years making noise so he will not disappear, then find that the noise has become another kind of cage. This matters because the persona did not stay outside the home. No public image does. It touches the people nearby. It changes how strangers speak about the family name. It makes private pain harder to protect. It can turn a person into a character so large that even loved ones have to search for the ordinary human being underneath. Rodman had become one of the most recognizable athletes in America, but being recognized is not the same as being understood. The world knew the hair, the laugh, the entrances, the championship clips, the impossible rebounds, and the headlines. His children knew a more private question. When the world was not calling his name, who was he able to be for them? A soccer field can hold a different kind of inheritance. Trinity Rodman runs toward space with her own speed, her own talent, her own name on the back of her jersey, and her own future unfolding far from the hardwood floors that made her father famous. The crowd may know the surname, but the game she plays belongs to her. That is what makes the wound sharper. She is not important because she is Dennis Rodman's daughter. She is important because she became an elite athlete in her own right, a young woman strong enough to stand in public with her own achievements, her own discipline, and her own voice. Yet family pain does not disappear just because a child becomes successful. A person can grow into excellence and still carry the ache of a missing presence. In Rodman's story, fatherhood is not a side chapter. It is the place where the old wound turns around and looks back at him. Dennis had once lived with an empty space where a father should have been. In 2012, he met his father, Philander Rodman Jr., in the Philippines after more than 4 decades apart. The scene carried a painful kind of symmetry. There are meetings that arrive so late they cannot behave like simple reunions. They can put 2 people in the same room, allow hands to touch, allow cameras to capture the outline, but the missing years remain outside the frame. Rodman was no longer the boy waiting in Dallas. He was a former champion, a Hall of Fame figure, a public name recognized across oceans. Yet the old absence did not vanish just because the person connected to it was finally near. That moment matters because it leads directly into the hardest mirror of his life. The man who had grown up with a father missing would later have to face the pain his own children felt. The circle did not close cleanly. It tightened. Trinity's public words in 2024 gave that wound a modern voice. By then, she had become a standout soccer player, an athlete with Olympic-level strength, a young woman whose career did not need to borrow light from her father's rings. Yet when she spoke about Dennis, the pain was not about fame. It was about presence. She said, "He is not a dad, maybe by blood, but nothing else." The sentence was short, but it carried years inside it. A daughter can train, travel, compete, answer cameras, and stand before crowds, yet still carry the ordinary wish that a parent had been there in a way that did not need headlines. Dennis later answered with a public apology, writing, "Sorry I was not the dad you wanted me to be." The apology came through the same public machinery that had magnified him for decades. A screen can carry regret. It can carry love. It can carry a man reaching for words after time has already moved. What it cannot do is return the years when a child needed the ordinary proof of a parent. The call at the right moment, the familiar seat in the stands, the quiet check-in after a hard day, the feeling that a parent will be there because that is what home is supposed to mean. This is why the Trinity chapter must become the emotional peak of the story. It is not gossip. It is not spectacle. It is the most human question in the life of a man who was so often treated as less than ordinary. Could he give his children the steadiness he once missed? The pain deepens because Rodman had named this regret long before Trinity's words reached the public. In his 2011 Hall of Fame speech, standing inside one of the most honored rooms basketball can give a man, he said, "I have one regret. I wish I was a better father." That was not the voice of a player explaining a missed assignment. It was the sound of a man looking past trophies toward the people who needed more than his greatness. By 2024, Trinity's words made that regret feel less like a line from a ceremony and more like a room that had stayed open for years. The hardest title in Rodman's life was never printed on a jersey. It was built in spaces where applause had no use. A father is not measured by the roar that follows him into an arena. The measure comes later, when the lights are down, when a child looks toward a seat and knows who is there, when a family learns whether fame can become tenderness after the cameras leave. This is where Rodman's story hurts most, and it should be told with fairness. He should not be flattened into a villain, and Trinity should not be reduced to a symbol in his biography. Both truths can stand at once. Rodman became one of the greatest rebounders the game has ever seen, and he also faced a family wound that no statistic could soften. He once endured the absence of a father, and later had to hear how his own absence had been felt. On the court, he could read the bounce of the ball with almost supernatural precision. He knew where a miss would go before other players had moved. He knew how to turn failure into one more chance. But fatherhood did not give him a rim to study, an angle to predict, or a clean possession to recover. He could save a ball from going out of bounds. He could not save every year that had already left the hands of his children. That is the center of the story. Dennis Rodman, the genius of the rebound, standing before losses that would not come back on a clean bounce. Over time, the noise around Dennis Rodman has changed shape. The old shock has softened into study. The man once treated as an outsider in plain view is now recognized as one of the clearest examples of how much basketball can be decided away from scoring. He made defense, positioning, timing, stamina, and rebounding feel like art. He made the dirty work under the rim impossible to dismiss. A rebound can look small in a box score until it arrives in the final minutes of a close game, when one extra possession changes the breath of an arena. Rodman lived in those possessions. He treated effort as a skill, not a slogan. He gave younger athletes permission to believe that value could be built from edge, endurance, study, and the willingness to do work cameras often miss. That is the part of his legacy that deserves to stay clear. Long after the jokes fade, long after the costumes become old photographs, the basketball remains. Coaches can still point to him as proof that a player does not need to dominate the ball to dominate meaning. Teammates can still understand the value of a person who accepts the hardest, least glamorous assignment and turns it into identity. Older fans can still remember the way he appeared under the rim as if called by the miss itself, arriving at the exact place where the game was about to change. His cultural imprint also traveled far beyond the hardwood. The hair, the clothes, the refusal to fit the expected mold of a male athlete in the 1990s, and the strange courage of presenting himself before America knew how to categorize him, all read differently with time. Some people saw chaos. Others saw freedom. Many saw both. His legacy is powerful because it is not clean. It contains genius and wounds, discipline and excess, beauty and regret. He remains one of the greatest rebounders in basketball history, a champion whose craft changed how people understood value without scoring. He also remains an unfinished human question, a reminder that the same visibility that makes a legend can leave the private person underneath less protected than the public image suggests. The point of honoring Rodman is not to pretend every chapter was graceful. It is to hold the full weight of the man, the player who made effort beautiful, the public figure who stretched the boundaries of sports culture, the son marked by absence, and the father still linked to pain he could not fully repair. His rebirth in public memory should not erase the wounds. It should make the story more honest. Dennis Rodman was never only the strange man America could not stop watching. He was a basketball genius who turned missed shots into life, and a human being who learned that some losses do not offer the same mercy. The arena is dark now, and the old footage has to provide the light. On a screen, Rodman is still young enough to fly sideways into a possession, still quick enough to reach the ball before anyone else, still alive inside the exact second that made him unforgettable. Away from the replay, he is 65 in 2026, a man whose basketball legacy has been secured and whose private story still carries rooms without neat endings. There is no need to invent a final sadness around him. The facts already carry enough weight. He became a champion, a Hall of Fame figure, a cultural symbol, and one of the greatest rebounders the game has ever known. He also became someone whose life cannot be polished into a clean trophy speech. That is why his story still holds people. It is not only strange, it is human. The older sports fan understands this better than anyone. Time has a way of changing the sound of a career. The roar becomes memory. The highlight becomes a clip. The jersey becomes fabric in a frame. The athlete becomes a man standing outside the season that made him famous, carrying both the applause and the cost. The old contradictions remain. The child who felt unseen became impossible to ignore. The late bloomer, without a clear place, found one in the most physical corners of professional basketball. The rebounder who could rescue missed shots could not rescue every relationship from distance, pressure, absence, and time. The public image that gave him visibility also made it harder for the tired human being underneath to step away. Still, the tribute should be honest. Dennis Rodman deserves to be remembered for the genius of his craft, the study, the nerve, the timing, the pain tolerance, and the strange mathematics of knowing where a missed shot would land. He deserves to be remembered as a player who gave his teams extra life without asking the offense to belong to him. He also deserves to be seen as a complicated man who lived through too much noise to be understood only by the noise. That is the lesson inside his story. Glory can make a life visible. Yet visibility alone cannot heal the private rooms. A championship ring can shine under perfect light, yet it cannot answer every regret. A crowd can chant a name, yet the most important voices in a person's life may still be waiting for a different kind of presence. A jersey hangs without movement. A pair of shoes sits without being tied. A Hall of Fame photograph rests near a quiet phone. On the screen, the ball hits the rim, kicks out, and Rodman appears again, right on time, hand reaching before every other hand. For thousands of nights, he chased what others missed and brought it back. One of the deepest aches in the story is that some losses do not return on a clean bounce. Some stay beyond the paint, beyond the lights, beyond the reach of even the greatest rebounder of his generation. And maybe that is why Dennis Rodman remains unforgettable in a way statistics alone cannot explain. He showed America that effort could be beautiful, that the overlooked parts of a game could decide history, and that a person can be both brilliant and wounded without fitting neatly into a single verdict. If Dennis Rodman's game still means something to you, leave a like and subscribe for more human stories behind the legends of sport.